What is good, everyone? Welcome to the channel. My name is Paul. I make videos about Japanese society, life and culture from the viewpoint of a long-term foreign resident. I've been here for 20 years and getting close to being able to say 21 years. Today I'm going to be talking about the supposed rise in anti-foreign sentiments in Japan. And basically I'm going to talk about what's been going on and the political repercussions of what's been happening as well. First, I want to make a quick disclaimer that I am allowing YouTube to auto-dub my videos through AI technology into other languages. So if you're listening to this in Japanese, well, first of all, welcome. But second of all, I don't entirely trust AI translation because, for one thing, how well does AI recognize sarcasm, for example? So if you hear me say something that you're puzzled by, or you think, wait, what's he trying to say there? By all means, go down into the comments and you can type in Japanese in the comments and I will see your comment and I will get back to you. Just go down and say, wait, you seem to be saying blah, 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 blah. What do you mean by that? Or what's your real opinion there? So I will definitely address those comments. So don't trust the AI translation. That's my caveat. The first thing I want to say about the topic, and it's kind of an obvious thing to ask right away, is have I experienced anything as a resident here? Have I noticed any differential treatment of myself? And the answer to that is no. I have not noticed anything personally that people have treated me different or been giving me side eye or anything out of the ordinary. So the first question answered is no, it's not really affecting me directly as far as I can tell. Now, I know that about 30% of the people who watch my videos are located here in Japan, and I have a lot of long-term foreign residents who get down into my comment sections, and I would really like to invite you to go down there and comment what's been happening to you. Have you noticed anything? That although it's the case I haven't felt anything personally, like I haven't felt anti-foreigner sentiment in my face in any way, shape, or form, I am going to be traveling soon to a couple of places in Japan which have been kind of epicenters of over-tourism, like having lots of foreign tourists visit, and I'm planning on vlogging that. So if you want to see potentially anything happening to me where I can say, well, okay, but that's maybe an example of it, please be sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you can see my upcoming travel vlogs. All right, now where is this issue coming from? Well, we saw in July there was an election in Japan where some political parties that had some rather anti-immigrant or anti-foreigner rhetoric got some seats in the parliament, and what we've been seeing a lot in media and social media that's really been highlighted is foreigners behaving badly in Japan, people not following the rules, not following the societal expectations about manners, and that has fueled a lot of people saying, like, Japan is overrun by foreigners and they're acting poorly, etc., etc. Which leads me to the first issue as I see it. The question you should ask is, okay, in the past 5 years or so, have foreign residents of Japan suddenly started acting with poorer manners or have suddenly, stopped caring what Japanese society thinks of their behavior? When you put it that way, it seems pretty unlikely. What has been going on in the past 5 years, at least post the pandemic? Japan is seeing record numbers of tourists. So unfortunately, what we've got is we've got a lot of conflation of foreign visitor behavior reflecting on all foreigners in Japan. So it's foreign people do this in Japan, foreign people are doing stupid TikTok dances in the middle of Shibuya Scramble, and foreigners are doing pull-ups on torii gates at shrines, violating a sacred space. And I guarantee you that it's not Japan residents that are doing that. This is influencers, people who are coming, trying to get social media clout, and Japan is being used as this kind of playground, especially because Japanese people aren't likely to call them out on it. Basically, Japanese are very non-confrontational, so when bad behavior happens, basically very rarely are people who do it called out, and that means that they feel like they can get away with it. And in fact, they kind of are. The repercussion is that it reflects on everyone badly, and that's the unfortunate thing, is that foreigners tend to be lumped in as a group, and the misbehavior is seen as foreigners laid whole. There's no parsing or differentiating between residents and visitors. So what you also see is that this anti-foreigner sentiment is really being fueled by the younger generations. We're talking Generation Z. They are the ones who are, of course, on social media. So they're the ones that are really seeing the bad behaved TikTokers and Instagrammers and YouTubers and nuisance streamers and that kind of thing. And so they're more heavily influenced by that, and they see like bad manners of non-Japanese people, and that taints their picture of foreigners in general. And so you're seeing these cries for like more limitations on foreigners. And the problem there is, well, Japan can certainly limit immigration and, change immigration policies, but are they really going to, address the problem, the elephant in the room that is tons and tons of tourist visitors? Like, are they going to turn off that tap of economic wealth anytime soon? That seems really highly unlikely. So it seems like residents or potential immigrants to the country are the ones that are going to suffer for the bad behavior of people who are only here temporarily. Now, of course, there are residents and immigrants who don't act well. Like, obviously, I'm not discounting that, but you'll see certain rumors float online that, like, one famous one that went around was that foreigners are 30% of the recipients of welfare in Japan, when the real number is right around 3%. Now, we can get into a discussion of whether foreigners should be eligible for welfare under the system. That's a different topic for a different day. But the fact remains is that you've got younger generation people who are seeing the misbehavior, and there's one other big factor that needs to be addressed, and that is the economics. The younger generation knows that the economy of Japan isn't great. Wages are pretty stagnant. Prices are getting higher. They're working long, hard hours and then going home to a tiny apartment in Tokyo and seeing at the same time all around them all these foreign visitors on holiday in Japan, splashing money around, having these fun experiences, having these great times, while residents are feeling like, I don't have the money to take a vacation. I don't have the money to act like this in my own country. And that's where you start getting the Japanese first sentiment that you're hearing. Like, that was the rallying cry of the Sanseito party that gained 7 seats in the last election. Basically, people are feeling like they are less privileged in their own country when compared to foreigners. But again, I have to reiterate, okay, the thing that gets me is that over and over again in the rhetoric leading up to the election, I kept hearing foreigners are getting special privileges. There's all these special privileges that foreigners are getting. And I'm sitting there thinking, what are these special privileges and how do I get them? Like, how do I get on this? I'm a foreign resident. Why am I not getting these special privileges? Because I'm paid in yen. I work a full-time job. I pay all my taxes, my city tax, my property tax, my income tax. I pay into the social insurance system. I pay into the health insurance system. Like, I'm doing everything that any other Japanese resident of Japan is doing. And I'm also in a job where I have not gotten a change in my salary in 15 years. I'm making the same amount of money now that I was 15 years ago. So yeah, no special privileges here. But I can see how it appears that way when you see nothing but foreigners treating Japan like their own theme park and having the money to spend on all of these great things while people who live here, are just trying to make ends meet. So the result is lumping all foreigners into the same category and then fueling an economic resentment into that as well. It's a large reason why there's this anti-immigrant or basically anti-foreigner sentiment going on. And we do have to acknowledge that immigration has increased in Japan recently, and that leads me into my next point, which is the political ramifications and what we might see for the future of Japanese immigration. Now, before we get into the political ramifications, I just want you to take the terminology far right and far left and put them over into the bin in your mind that's labeled Western politics. because Japanese politics are different. There's been a knee-jerk reaction to label like the Sanseito party as far right. And while they certainly have right-leaning positions, I don't think that's really an effective label, to be honest. Because Japanese politics are not German politics, are not UK politics, are not US politics, etc. You would probably be surprised at some of the left-leaning positions that right-wing parties have, or right-leaning positions that left-wing parties have in Japan. It's not as simple as that. So as I mentioned earlier, Sanseito is the party that got 7 new seats in the current Japan election. And how did that happen? Well, they had a lot of rhetoric, a lot of things that they talked about, which were taken up by the media as being very anti-foreign. Now, I want to actually get into the realities of what people actually said. There's a little radio there by the post. I was like, suddenly, who's speaking? That was really weird. I want to get into the realities of what they've actually said and what their actual policies are. I mean, you can go look this stuff up on their website. I mean, they've got it laid out, what they support, what they want to see. And I think you might be surprised at what I actually tentatively agree with. And there are certainly things that I disagree with about their policy proposals. So let's first start with things that I feel I can tentatively agree with. And the first is actually, believe it or not, immigration. If you actually go into their rhetoric, and what they have to say about it is they want a comprehensive immigration plan. And the quote that I want to pull up right now that I think reflects how they're being misconstrued is the following. They feel like there aren't any established rules for accepting foreigners into Japanese society. And what they mean by that is not that there's no rules about visas and residency and, immigration policies. I mean, those things exist. What they're referring to is how do we accept or bring foreigners and immigrants into our communities. And the leader of Sanseito has come out and said more than once, we're not anti-immigration or we're not anti-foreigner. They just don't want it done how many other countries have done it. And that is specifically, it's always been fueled by business and corporate interests. Basically, businesses want bodies into jobs. They want cheap labor in certain positions, the types of jobs that there's not enough Japanese to take over, right? So like, in farming, agriculture, and monotonous factory work and that kind of thing. And it's led to things like the infamous trainee policy that Japan had for a number of years. And it was much maligned by both Japanese and foreign bodies alike, saying that it basically created this foreigner underclass where businesses would bring in these trainees. They'd be paid very little because they're interns, and they would work long hours. Their passports would be confiscated so they couldn't try to escape. There was all kinds of horror stories revolving around this trainee program, and it was basically just in place so that businesses could get the cheap labor. And that is essentially what the Sanseito party is coming out against. They're saying we need to establish rules where we're not just throwing workers into jobs without considering how they're going to integrate into Japanese society. And that is to say, how are we going to teach them or get them to fit in with the cultural rules, the societal norms, the expected manners? How are we going to get them the necessary language ability so that they can function in the society and be real contributors beyond just an economic cog in the machine? And in that respect, I don't disagree with them. Obviously, the devil's in the details, what they would actually come out with in terms of the details of their comprehensive policy. I'm not sure. It might end up being something that I really dislike. But in terms of their actual rhetoric, it's not so much anti-immigrant, it's just anti-immigration without integration. And All of the things we love about Japanese society works because of these manners and rules and expectations that exist here. I made a whole video about this 2 weeks ago, like fitting into Japanese society, and I think that's really important. Learning the language is important. Learning the customs and the manners is important. And it's good for both sides. It's good for immigrants as well, because you don't want to end up with immigrants who kind of like, they feel like they're an underclass. Like, well, we're just here to work and go home, and we're not allowed to do anything else. And then you end up with these immigrant communities where there's resentment, and that can boil up a lot of trouble. And this is potentially possible here in Japan because illegal immigration is so small. Like, Japan's borders are secure. There's not people coming over on boats, or there's no border they can just walk across. And so like, Japan is in a position where they can genuinely come up with a policy that could be really effective. Again, would I actually agree with the actual Sanseito policy? I don't know. The other thing that I would tentatively agree with, and again, devil's in the details, is foreign ownership of property. Obviously, I would be very much against a blanket ban on foreigners owning property at all. Like, that would be another way to create that underclass of citizen or underclass of resident. Like, oh, you can live here, but you're not allowed to own anything. I'm hoping that what that would mean is that it would be putting more restrictions, transparency, and responsibility when it comes to foreign investment just coming in and buying land. So if there was a kind of policy which made it more difficult for entities who do not reside in Japan to purchase property, I think there's potentially good in that, because there are certainly the situations where foreign investors buy up all sorts of property and end up pricing out the local people, making luxury estates for, vacation homes and those sorts of things. I think if you want to come to Japan and purchase an abandoned house, the Akiya that are so popular these days, fix it up, become a resident, start paying local resident taxes, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That should be allowed. I should be allowed to have a house after having been here however many years. I think the issue is non-residents, and I think there is room for policies that could be used to limit or certain guidelines and steps that have to be taken for it to be done well. So in that sense, I'm not in direct disagreement with them, despite their supposed anti-foreign rhetoric. And I have to tell you that I'm going to end this video by playing an actual clip of the founder of the party explaining his real thoughts on foreigners and how they've actually kicked out people from the party who were saying things that were too extreme, that they don't actually believe. And so you're going to hear some of this from the mouth of the man himself. Now, that said, we do have to address things that I definitely disagree with. One is they propose that naturalized citizens should still not be allowed to vote. Meaning, if I became Japanese, I still wouldn't be able to vote or to hold public office, actually run for public office. It would have to be like second generation or maybe third generation of the family that would be allowed to. And that's just discrimination, plain and simple. That's just saying like, oh, you can become a citizen but not really be a citizen. And that's exactly kind of creating that second class citizen that I was talking about before, which I think is counterproductive. Now, speaking of that second class citizen, the fact that they would, if they could do something like that, and let's be honest, they have 7 seats. They're not in any position anytime soon of creating policy for the country. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. But the other potential issue is not even to do with foreigners or immigration, and that is, if you wanted to create a citizenship that doesn't allow voting, they would have to change the Constitution. Because right now the Constitution is guaranteeing your right to vote as a citizen. So they'd have to change the Constitution. And that's just it. They want to change the Constitution in ways that I think a lot of outsiders who are like, oh, yeah, they're anti-immigrant, go Japan, would maybe back up and say, well, okay, maybe that's not the greatest political party that we want to be supporting. Mainly because they want to change the Constitution and remove certain citizen rights and replace them with citizen duties towards their country. So maybe this is just me being far too American, but the idea of changing a constitution so that people have less rights is something I could not get behind. I think if you're Japanese, why would you vote for something that is going to give you less rights? That doesn't seem like something that is very smart to vote for. The second part of that is they've stated they want to remove the clauses that make it clear that Japan, it's the sovereignty of the people. Like, the Japanese people are sovereign, and they are the ones who determine the course of the country through democracy. And Sanseito wants to restore sovereignty to the emperor. Emperor as head of state once again. So basically taking away rights, replacing them with duties, and restoring the emperor. It seems like that was done in the past. Something about Imperial Japan, and, well, I mean, nothing bad happened back then, obviously. I wonder if the AI translation caught the sarcasm there. Of course, absolutely, there are Japanese conservatives, Japanese right-wingers who want to see the emperor restored. But I don't feel like that would be the best thing for Japanese people, and I would be surprised if any more than kind of a more fringe pro-imperial family. Japanese revere the emperor. Like, the imperial system of the imperial family is not going anywhere anytime soon. And I don't have any problem with it. I don't have any kind of anti-monarchy stance or anything like that. I'm fine with there being an emperor in Japan. I'm just a little queasy about them being head of state again, and I think the majority of Japanese are as well. But I'm sure I'll get a few in the comments who say, no, we need this imperial system. And if that's you, please explain why. Because maybe open my mind as to why it would be better to have the emperor as head of state again. Because maybe there's some good points to be made. Rather than just, don't just call me an idiot, point out you're an idiot because it would actually do this and this and this and this. And that would be interesting to read, at least. I'm all about educating myself about Japan. That's one of the reasons why I love living in this country, because I'm always learning new things. So at the end of the day, I basically wanted to get out what I felt about this anti-foreign sentiment, what I know about it, and wanted to impart that knowledge to you. In a nutshell, it's a lot of younger generation. It's being fueled by media and social media, emphasizing poor behavior of foreigners and how foreigners are being lumped together as just, if foreigner does something, it's foreigners do this. As a result, there's been some political parties that have gained seats because they're talking about stricter immigration, coming up with new immigration policies, going against the policies that seem to be bringing more foreigners into Japan, although again, that's far more on the tourist end than the resident end. But at the end of the day, that's the situation. How it's going to unfold from here on in, I don't know. I'm not someone who's felt particularly threatened by this, or who's like, oh no, Japan is doing a slide into dangerous territory for me to live here. Like, that's not one of the things I'm worried about. But it'll be interesting to see how things develop going forward. I'm going to end with just this clip I promised of the Sanseito leader and what he actually has to say. And I feel like it will dispel a little bit of the misinformation out there about, they've been smeared as super right and absolutely anti-foreigner. I'll let this clip speak for itself. So if you made it this far in the video, like, subscribe, and here's the clip.
極論の人もいるんですよ。まさに外国人を出てってほしいという人もいらっしゃる。でも私たちはそういう党にはしたくないと思っている。で、そういう人たちには合わないんでやめてくださいというふうに言うと。そしたら騙された、党費返せと言って訴訟を起こされたこともあります。いや、うちはそういう党じゃないということで、それは言い続けますね。はい。だからそっち言った方が票が取れるからとか、それはダメです。票を取るために理念とか哲学を変えちゃってダメなんで。私は本当の意味での排他主義とか差別主義の人たちは私はものすごく嫌いなので。
ここ信じていいですね。
はい。
日本国民は外国人を差別したいなんて思ってないからですよ。 もっと本当に外国人に対して厳しい政党他にいっぱいあるから、そっち行った方がいいよ。ねえ、我々はどっちかって皆さんの仲間ですよ。戦争反対だし、減税だし、外国人差別反対だし、ねえ、共産党とか社民党とかもっと仲良くやれるはずなんだよ、本当は。日本変えましょうよ。日本をいい国にしましょう。あの時は誤解してたと、ね、参政党があってよかったと言ってもらえるような、そんな政治を私は皆さんとやりたいんですよ。ねえ、私たちは対立とかじゃなくて、とにかく理念やビジョンを共有したい。私たちは、ね、誰かを追い出そうとか排除しようとかそういうことじゃなくて、日本を強くて豊かで、ね、優しい国にしたいんですよ。